Hundreds of years ago, people imagined that one day we would fly through the skies, travel into outer space, and discover bizarre things called black holes, places where even light cannot escape. Over time, many of these once crazy ideas became real. That's where imagination often leads, to answers, discoveries, and things once thought impossible. The mysterious eventually stops being a mystery. But there are still many things, especially those left behind by ancient people, that remain unexplained. And today, we'll look at the most mysterious ones. So, let's begin with number 15. Deucalion and the Greek flood myth. Have you heard the story of the angry god and the flood? We're not talking about the biblical version. Ancient Greek tradition tells of Deucalion, son of Prometheus, who survived a disaster that sounds pretty familiar. In accounts preserved by Ovid and Apollodorus, Zeus decides humanity has become corrupt and sends an enormous flood to wipe away the Bronze Age world from the face of the earth. But Prometheus warns Deucalion beforehand, allowing him and Pyrrha to escape inside a large chest. For 9 days and nights, they drift across the flooded land before reaching a mountain, usually identified as Mount Parnassus. Then comes the curious part. Mesopotamian tradition tells of Utnapishtim. Genesis gives us Noah. And ancient Indian tradition remembers Manu, each involving a warning, a devastating flood, a vessel, survivors, and life beginning again afterward. These stories arose across different cultures and periods, but their bones feel remarkably alike. Whether they preserve distant memories of real ancient disasters or ridiculous stories passed between civilizations is still an enduring mystery. Number 14. Scholomance. If you have not heard of the Scholomance, maybe you should have, because Romanian folklore describes it as a secret school where only chosen students spent years learning forbidden knowledge, weather magic, animal speech, and powers ordinary people were never meant to understand. The students were known as the Solomonari, and many versions say only 10 were admitted at a time. 9 then returned, while the 10th became the Weathermaker, destined to ride a dragon called the Balor and command storms from the mountains. The legend became even darker through Bram Stoker's Dracula, published in 1897, where Van Helsing suggests Dracula may have studied at Scholomance. Stories usually place the school somewhere near Hermannstadt, modern Sibiu, in the Carpathians. Whether the tale grew from older Romanian weather traditions, medieval magic, or later Gothic imagination is hard to untangle. But the idea of a school where knowledge came with a terrible price has refused to disappear. Will you join it? Number 13. Egil Skallagrimsson's Lost Silver. In archaeology, lost treasures usually begin with a rumor. But Egil Skallagrimsson's silver comes from one of Iceland's best-known medieval sagas. Egil, believed to have lived from around 904 to 995 AD, was no ordinary Viking. He was a brave warrior, a farmer, a berserker, and one of the finest Old Norse skaldic poets ever remembered. According to Egil's saga, he fought for King Thelstan of England at the Battle of Brunanburh in 937 AD, where his brother was killed. Thelstan compensated Egil with 2 chests of silver, and years later those chests followed him back to Iceland. Near the end of his life, Egil took the treasure and 2 servants into the hills around Mosfell, roughly 20 kilometers east of Reykjavik. He returned without the silver or his servants. The saga claims he killed both servants so nobody could reveal the hiding place. Number 12. Dobharch. The man-eating otters might not be scary, but what about a 7-foot man-eating otter wolf that could chase people on land and smash rocks with its head? Irish folklore calls it the Dobharch, or waterhound, and one story refuses to disappear. On September 22, 1722, Grin Connolly was washing clothes beside Glenade Lough, County Leitrim, when the creature attacked and killed her. Her husband, Terence McLaughlin, later found the beast beside her body and killed it. According to the tale, its dying scream summoned a second Dabar Chuch, which pursued Terence and his companion for miles before they finally killed it near Cashel Garin. Here is where folklore becomes wonderfully uncomfortable. An old gravestone at Conwall Cemetery bears Connolly's name and an unusual carving interpreted as an otter-like animal pierced by a weapon. Reported encounters continued, including sightings at Loch Raheen's in 1968 and Owie Island in 2000. Maybe Ireland never had monster otters, but that gravestone keeps the old question alive. Number 11. Sun Tzu's army of 180 women to win a battle. You need an army. But Sun Tzu was supposedly handed 180 women from a royal harem and told to prove his military genius. The extraordinary story appears in Sima Qian's Shiji, written centuries after Sun Tzu's traditional lifetime in the 6th to 5th centuries BC. According to the account, King Hel of Wu wanted to test whether the principles behind the art of war actually worked. Sun Tzu divided the women into 2 companies and placed the king's 2 favorite concubines in command. His first order was greeted with laughter. Sun Tzu accepted responsibility, explaining that unclear instructions were the general's fault, then carefully repeated them. They laughed again. This time he declared that disobedience belonged to the officers and ordered both favorites executed, despite Hel desperately objecting. New commanders were appointed. Suddenly, every command was followed perfectly. The story is brutal, and historians debate how literally we should accept it, but ancient Chinese tradition remembered Sun Tzu as a man willing to prove discipline with terrifying seriousness. Number 10. The Fomori. The raiders from the otherworld Irish mythology can be super frustrating. We mean, on one hand, we know very little about the people who first told these stories. On the other, what survived is packed with beings that sound almost too otherworldly to accept or even forget. The Fomori, or Fomor, are among the darkest. Early Irish texts describe them as supernatural enemies associated with the sea, the underworld, chaos, blight, and destruction. A 7th century elegy for Mestelman already places them beneath the human world, while later manuscripts turn them into monstrous raiders, sometimes with 1 eye, 1 arm, and 1 leg. In the Liborna Huidra, certain Fomori even appear with animal-like features. Their greatest rivals were the Tuatha Dé Danann, who eventually defeated them at the Second Battle of Magtoyard. Yet the 2 groups were never completely separate. Brez, an early king of the Tuatha Dé, was half Fomorian. Whether these beings began as memories of raiders, old nature gods, or something far stranger is still debated. Number 9. The Moon That Split in 1178. Now, this story might sound like a man-made tale to scare medieval people, but 5 monks in Canterbury watched something weird happen to the moon on June 18, 1178. Their account was later written down by Gervase of Canterbury, who described the moon's upper horn suddenly splitting in 2, followed by fire, sparks, and what looked like smoke pouring from it. Centuries later, geophysicist Jack B. Hartung proposed that the monks may have witnessed the birth of the 22-kilometer-wide Giordano Bruno crater on the moon. That idea sounded perfect until later studies pushed the crater's age back to roughly 1 million years or more. Another calculation showed that such an impact in 1178 should have produced an incredible meteor storm visible across Earth. So what did those monks actually see? A meteor crossing directly in front of the moon is one possibility. Another is that Gervase's date was wrong. So, what is the actual truth? Number 8. Raining stones and other impossible showers throughout recorded history. there have been events that sound less like weather and more like somebody broke the rules of nature. Pliny the Elder wrote about showers of fish and frogs in the 1st century AD, while Athenaeus later described Paeonia and Dardania becoming overwhelmed by frogs. The list only gets more perplexing from there. Judas tree seeds fell over Italy in 1840, sugar-like crystals appeared in Lake County, California in 1857, hazelnuts reportedly rained over Dublin in 1867, and live pond mussels dropped onto Paderborn, Germany in 1892. Then came the stones. In October 1901, residents of Harrisonville, Ohio, reported rocks crashing through windows and falling for days despite nobody being caught throwing them. Similar episodes were later recorded in Sumatra, Belgium, France, Australia, New Zealand, New York, and Arizona. Waterspouts can explain fish and frogs, while volcanoes can drop pumice. But repeated stone showers in calm weather? That part remains considerably harder to explain. Number 7. New England's Day of Darkness on May 19, 1780. At 10:00 a.m., the people of New England watched daylight disappear. By late morning, the sky had become so dark that birds returned to their nests, flowers closed, and households lit candles as though night had arrived early. The strange darkness spread across parts of Maine, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and as far south as New Jersey. Then evening brought another shock. The moon reportedly glowed blood red before vanishing behind the same black haze. With no telegraph, radio, or scientific explanation, many residents turned to the Bible and feared Judgment Day had begun. For years, theories ranged from eclipses to volcanic eruptions. Then, in 2008, researchers from the University of Missouri studied fire scars in old trees from Ontario and found evidence of enormous Canadian wildfires during that year. Thick smoke mixed with fog likely smothered the region. The mystery may now have an answer. But for those who lived through it, the world truly seemed to end before lunchtime. Number 6. The Cintamani stone. The Cintamani is a wish-fulfilling stone that appears across both Hindu and Buddhist traditions, and its story has wandered through religion, myth, kingship, and even modern occultism. In Hindu texts, similar sacred jewels are linked with Vishnu, Ganesha, Indra, and the legendary Shamantaka gem mentioned in the Vishnu Purana. Buddhist traditions place the Cintamani in the hands of powerful bodhisattvas such as Avalokiteshvara and Ksitigarbha, while Tibetan images sometimes show it carried by the Lung Ta, or wind horse. One Tibetan legend says a sacred object fell from the sky during the reign of King La Thothori Nyatsen, centuries before Buddhism fully reached Tibet. Centuries later, Russian artist and mystic Nicholas Roerich claimed in the 1920s to possess a fragment connected with the Cintamani and traveled through Asia searching for Shambhala. Some later writers even suggested the stone was Moldavite, glass formed by a meteor impact roughly 15 million years ago. So, was it a jewel or a meteorite? Number 5. The Geats, the epic poem Beowulf, gives us monsters, dragons, and a warrior strong enough to tear Grendel's arm from his body, but buried beneath all that legend is something surprisingly real: the people Beowulf belonged to. They were the Geats, a warrior society associated with southern Sweden during the 5th and 6th centuries AD. Beowulf himself may be legendary, but his uncle Hygelac appears to cross into historical records. Continental writers mention a king identified as Clocolaicus, who led a raid into Frankish territory and died around 500 INS AD, closely matching the Hygelac described in the poem. Earlier writers such as Claudius Ptolemy also referred to peoples called the Gutai in Scandinavia, while later Norse sources used names such as Gotar. Then their identity slowly faded. By the Middle Ages, the Geats had largely become part of the Swedish kingdom. Their warriors vanished as a separate people, but their names survived through Götaland, Gothenburg, and one of the greatest heroic poems ever written. Number 4. Savitri and Satyavan. If there's one thing we humans have always believed, it's that death doesn't negotiate. Savitri, however, is remembered in the Mahabharata for doing exactly that. Her father, King Ashvapati of Madra, had prayed for a child for 18 years before Savitri was granted to him. When she later chose Satyavan, the exiled son of the blind king Dyumatsana, the sage Narada delivered a terrible warning. Satyavan had only 1 year left to live. Savitri married him anyway. On the foretold day, Satyavan collapsed while cutting wood and died with his head in her lap. Then Yama, the god of death, came personally for his soul. Savitri followed him and refused to turn back. Impressed, Yama offered several wishes, anything except Satyavan's life. She restored Dyumatsana's sight and kingdom, secured 100 sons for her father, then asked for 100 sons of her own with Satyavan. Yama had trapped himself. To keep his promise, he had to return her husband. Number 3. The Teos Caves. The Teos Caves in Ecuador became famous because the story around them sounds almost too good to be true. In the 1960s and 1970s, explorer Janos Juan Moritz claimed the caves contained artificial passages and a strange metal library filled with engraved tablets. Then came Erich von Däniken, who pushed the idea even further in The Gold of the Gods. In 1976, a major expedition involving more than 100 people entered the system, including astronaut Neil Armstrong as honorary president. What they found was far less sensational, but still impressive. Vast chambers, steep shafts, unusual rock formations, and evidence that indigenous Shuar people had used parts of the caves for generations. No golden books appeared, no confirmed alien technology turned up. Yet the legend never died, partly because Moritz insisted he had seen passages unlike anything natural. That leaves the real puzzle not in what has been proven, but in why so many extraordinary claims became attached to this one cave system. Number 2. Enochian, the language of angels. We may never know what language the angels would speak, but John Dee believed he had written one down. Dee was no wandering magician. Born in London in 1527, he became a respected mathematician, astronomer, and advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. Yet during the 1580s, his work took a much stranger direction. Together with the controversial scryer Edward Kelly, Dee held sessions in which Kelly stared into crystals and claimed to see and hear angels. Dee recorded the messages carefully in his diaries. By 1583, those sessions had produced a strange alphabet of 21 letters, along with words, tables, prayers, and what became known as the Enochian calls. Dee believed this was the original divine language, spoken before human speech became divided. Skeptics noticed similarities with English and suspected invention, but the surviving manuscripts proved Dee took the system very seriously. A royal scholar spent years trying to speak with angels and left behind an entire language nobody has ever fully explained. Number 1. The vanishing of the Kingdom of Khotan. Something strange happened to the Kingdom of Khotan. For centuries, it was one of the Silk Road's richest kingdoms, famous for jade, silk, Buddhist temples, and manuscripts. Then, its world began slipping beneath the Taklamakan Desert. Khotan was conquered in 1006. Yet what explorers later encountered made its story far more haunting. During the early 1900s, Aurel Stein and others crossed the desert and came upon abandoned settlements, ruined shrines, ancient writings, and houses buried beneath enormous stretches of sand. Places that had once held entire communities had become lifeless ruins surrounded by desert. Warfare and changing climate explain part of the collapse, but they cannot recreate those final years or tell us what became of everyone who once lived there. Even today, the desert occasionally gives back pieces of that forgotten world. And that may be Khotan's greatest mystery. How does a flourishing kingdom become a buried memory? Well, we hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you very soon.